Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Melissa, and today we are going to do a first chapter challenge. Alright, as you have no doubt seen from the title and the thumbnail, this is going to be a bit of a mini-series on my channel. I am gearing up for an unhaul and hopefully rearranging my shelves to make room for more books. And I thought this would be a fun way to assist me in unhauling books that I'm just not sure I want to get rid of. So to start it off, I'm going to go through all my special and exclusive editions. I always find those seem to be the hardest for me to let go. Even if I have no desire to read these books, I just can't seem to part with anything that has an alternate cover or a sprayed or stenciled edge. In order to hold myself accountable to one of my 2022 goals of the year, I want to be sure I'm only keeping books that I really want to read or ones that have been favorites of mine. Considering I'm not reading nearly as much YA fantasy as I have in the past, I'm trying to be as realistic as possible with the books that I choose to keep. So today's edition is strictly going to be some of my Fairyloot special edition books. I have a list here, I think of like 6-7 books that I'm going to share, so grab your favorite beverage or snack and let's take a peek at these books. Alright, first up is Year of the Reaper by Makia Lucifer. I apologize if I am butchering that name. Fairyloot describes this as a mystery with ghosts and romance. It sounds interesting. I haven't heard of this book before. I had received it in the Fairyloot box, so we're going to read the synopsis and then I will give you my thoughts on the opening chapter. So the synopsis reads, 3 years ago, Lord Cassia disappeared in the midst of war on a mission entrusted to him by the king. Since then, a devastating plague has swept the land, leaving countless dead and the kingdom forever altered. Having survived a rotting prison cell and a merciless illness, Cass, now 18, wants only to return to his home in the mountains and forget past horrors. But home is not what he remembers. His castle has become a refuge for the royal court, and they have brought their enemies with them. When an assassin targets those closest to the queen, Cass is drawn into a search for a killer, one that leads him to form an unexpected bond with a brilliant young historian named Lena. Cass and Lena soon realize that who is behind the attacks is far less important than why. They must look to the past, following the trail of a terrible secret, one that could threaten the kingdom's newfound peace and plunge it back into war. So after I read this first chapter, the few opening sentences paint a world I would describe as somewhat Rome-inspired. At least that's what it reminded me of. In reading the first chapter, we are told everything of nothing. I think this is going to be a story where we're learning as we go. One thing about this, now remember, these are all my opinions, but it reads more like an adult fantasy, or at least in the beginning. We are introduced to Cass, who apparently can see ghosts. We meet one of these ghosts who Cass knew well while this ghost was still alive. And the ghost begs Cass to bury him. And while this is going on, we are flashed back to a moment in Cass's history, which no doubt will play a part, I think, in the story going forward. I am curious about this. We do open with a male perspective, which I find to be very rare in YA fantasies. So I think for now, this is going to stay on my shelf because I really was intrigued by the first chapter. As with all of these books, if you have read any of these that I mentioned, please let me know in the comments what you thought of these. That may also help me, because I have a feeling with all these special edition books, I'm going to have a hard time parting with any of them, even if I don't enjoy the first chapter. Alright, so next up we have Witches Steeped in Gold by Is it Cianon Smart? I really need to get better at these authors' names. I am so sorry. Anyways, Fairyloot pitched this as a Jamaican-inspired fantasy about two enemy witches who must join together to take down a common enemy. I love the idea of this, and I'm also hoping that I do enjoy this first chapter and this book as a whole, because I've already pre-ordered the second one from Fairyloot recently. So let's read the synopsis. Order divides them, revenge will unite them. Uraya Adair has spent her life in a cell. Heir of an overthrown and magically gifted dynasty, she was exiled from the island nation of Ayaka. But every day brings her closer to freedom and vengeance. Jasmine Cario grew up dressed in gold with stolen magic at her fingertips. Daughter of the self-crowned Doyen, her existence is a threat to her mother's rule. But Jasmine has no intention of dying. Sworn enemies, the two witches enter a deadly alliance to take down the woman who threatens both their worlds. But revenge is a bloody pursuit. And nothing is certain except the lengths Uraya and Jasmine will go to win this game. A fierce and thrilling story where dangerous magic reigns supreme and betrayal lurks beneath every word. So there's not a lot given in the synopsis. It does give me the feeling of possibly a darker, grittier story, which I would love. I'm especially curious about Jasmine's stolen magic and how that is detrimental to the Doyen, who is her mother. So after I read the first chapter, first of all, the writing style is lovely. For me, it doesn't seem too flowery, yet it's atmospheric to make it very easy for you to be transported into this world. The first chapter wasn't very long, and it's written in a first-person narrative. So if you like those types of stories, this would be an option for you. We are introduced to Jasmine, who is the Doyen's daughter, the leader of their world. In addition to this, she is apparently also a member of a secret order of those that are actually against the Doyen and her practices. So the Doyen seems to be kind of like a tyrannical leader, which Jasmine acknowledges. However, as her daughter, obviously there is a personal conflict. I do like the vibes of this one, and I'm curious to see how this story plays out. I will say there is a 50-50 shot of me either really enjoying this story or not liking it at all. I feel like it's one of those ones I'm either going to love it or dislike it very much. As I mentioned, I had already pre-ordered the second one, mainly because, I mean, this Fairyloot edition, can we just look at how stunning this is? Let's hope the story matches this design. So this is the outside. It's got the stenciled edges the whole way around, and the same kind of stenciling is actually on the hardback itself. And then there's also some art on the inside of the dust jacket. So I'm thinking this is Jasmine because it did mention in the first chapter something about her silver hair marks her as one of these people, and she was mentioning that as a rebel, so I don't know if that has something to do with the type of magic that she has. But yeah, this is another one that apparently is going to stay on my shelf. We're not starting off very strong here with unhauling any books, but let's continue. Alright, next one is probably the most beautiful book I currently own. There's something about the design of this one and the color palette that is just everything. It just makes my heart so happy every time I see it on my shelf. And that one is The Girl Beneath the Sea by Axie O. I mean, look at these colors. And then there's the dragon. And the end papers on this one are just absolutely stunning. Fairyloot describes this one as a retelling of the classic Korean folktale by Shim Chong. Sadly, I'm not familiar with that one. I'm actually not familiar with a lot of Korean folklore, but honestly, if I don't vibe with this one, I won't be able to part with it. I mean, this one is just too pretty. Thankfully, I have heard a lot of good things about this book, so let's hope that I like it as well. Let's read the synopsis. This one says, "Deadly storms, an ancient curse, will her sacrifice save them all?" For generations, deadly storms have raged Mina's homeland. Her people believe the sea god, once their protector, now curses them with death and despair. To appease him, each year a maiden is thrown into the sea in the hopes that one day the true bride will be chosen and end the suffering. Many believe Shim Chong, Mina's brother's beloved, to be the legendary true bride. But on the night Chong is to be sacrificed, Mina's brother follows her, knowing that to interfere is a death sentence. To save her brother, Mina throws herself into the water in Chong's stead. Swept away to the spirit realm, a magical city of lesser gods and mythical beasts, Mina finds the sea god trapped in an enchanted sleep. With the help of a mysterious young man and a motley crew of demons, gods, and spirits, Mina sets out to wake him and bring an end to the storms once and for all. But she doesn't have much time. A human cannot live long in the land of the spirits, and there are those who would do anything to keep the sea god from waking. So I am hoping, with this synopsis, and the fact that it's a Korean legend, that I'm not disappointed. Can we just talk about how morbid the thought of throwing your daughter into the sea? I think the old legends had a flair for the dramatic. But I digress. I will say, though, I've been loving all the Asian-inspired stories I've been reading recently. I've read 2 or 3 this year. Books like Jade Fire Gold, Six Crimson Cranes. I never really knew anything about those legends, and honestly, not a lot about the culture in general. So this has been an interesting way to learn about the different legends and cultures in such a fun and digestible way. So on picking this up, there's a quote on the back that says, "Don't chase fate, let fate chase you." And I just absolutely love that quote. I will say, though, the sacrifice trope, especially where family is concerned, it has shown up a lot in the last few fantasies that I have read. And looking at the synopsis, can I just say, sigh? And I'm hoping that maybe I'll be surprised and it won't matter because, I mean, hot damn, is this a pretty book. But anyway, so I read the first chapter and it's pretty much the synopsis of the book. Ending with Mina jumping into the sea in place of her brother's beloved. I can't say there's really anything that truly piqued my interest with this one, but suffice it to say, as gorgeous as this is, and the fact that it's Korean folklore, it's going to stay, at least for now. And I am going to attempt to read it at some point. But even if I don't, there's no way I'm going to be able to part with this book. I just love the color scheme. Alright, on to number 4, which is another one that I had never heard of until I received my Fairyloot box. And then I'm seeing this book everywhere. So the one I'm talking about is Only a Monster by Vanessa Lynn. And again, stunning, stunning book. Okay, so this is pitched as a contemporary fantasy set in London filled with monster families and magical underworlds, and it's supposed to have a swoon-worthy romance. I must say this has already lost points for the fact that it is a contemporary fantasy. I'm not much of a contemporary or urban fantasy reader. I've read very few, and by very few I mean like one, and that was Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. But it's too relatable to the real world for me. All that unnecessary blabbering aside, I am kind of intrigued by the monster families with cruel legacies. So let's read the synopsis. In every story there is a hero and a monster. It should have been the perfect summer. Sent to stay with her late mother's eccentric family in London, 16-year-old Joan is determined to enjoy herself. She loves her nerdy job at the historic Holland House, and when her super cute co-worker Nick asks her on a date, it feels like everything is falling into place. Then a Good Samaritan attempt gone wrong sends Joan spinning through time, and her life quickly begins to unravel. Her family aren't just eccentric, they're monsters with terrifying hidden powers. And Nick just isn't any cute boy. He is a legendary monster slayer who will do anything to bring them down. As she battles Nick, Joan is forced to work with the beautiful and ruthless Aaron Oliver, heir to a monster family that hates her own. She'll have to embrace her own monstrousness if she is to save herself and her family, because in this story, she is not the hero. So the prologue was only 5 pages, so I read the prologue and then I read the first chapter. There was a quote in the prologue that I really liked that said, "The real monsters look like me and you," and I was struck by how true of a statement that is even in the real world. So the first chapter ends very mysteriously. We are introduced to our main character, Joan, who was just 6 years old in the prologue. She is talking with her grandmother, who is telling her that she is a monster. And then in the first chapter, we fast forward a few years where Joan is older and heading out for her first date. While waiting for her date to arrive, an incident occurs where she is trying to help someone, and after touching that person she was helping, the daylight turns to night. And the very person she was trying to help is just gone. So it leaves you with the question, is this something that the person did that she was helping, or is this something that she herself made happen? And I'm really curious to see where this story is going to go. So, as a side note, we are also introduced to Joan's family in this first chapter, and I rather enjoyed the family dynamic. The banter was very light. You can really feel the affection and the humor, and it gave me the impression that this is a very close family. So, all that being said, for now, this one will have a home on my TBR. And side note, it sounds like we might time travel in this one, and I think that's one of my prompts for the Magical Readathon. So I may have just found myself a book to read. Okay, so the next one really wowed me on the design concept. And it's another one of those ones that includes some of my favorite color duos. That book is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. I mean, how gorgeous is this cover? And then check out these stenciled edges. I just think they're stunning. Disclaimer. I have not read any other books by Stephanie Garber. I have not read the Caraval series, and if I'm not mistaken, I think I heard somewhere that this is part of that same world in some way, or at least a nod to it. Don't quote me on that, but if it is, I'm wondering if me reading this will be a true judgment not having read Caraval. We shall see. If you do know, please let me know in the comments. Fairyloot description about this book was that this is a book about love, curses, and the lengths that people will go to find their happy ever after. Honestly, it's not a blurb I would be particularly drawn to. It's kind of too romantic and not enough fantasy for me. I kind of like a little bit more like plot. Plus, I'm not really into stories where a love interest uses magic. Just to me, it makes the relationship not feel quite real. But anyway, let's read the synopsis. Never make a deal with a fate. For as long as she can remember, Evangeline Fox has believed in happily ever after. Until she learns that the love of her life is about to marry another and her dreams are shattered. Desperate to stop the wedding and heal her wounded heart, Evangeline strikes a deal with the charismatic but wicked Prince of Hearts. In exchange for his help, he asks for 3 kisses to be given at the time and place of his choosing. But after Evangeline's first promised kiss, she learns that bargaining with an immortal is a dangerous game, and that the Prince of Hearts wants far more from her than she pledged. He has plans for Evangeline, plans that will either end in the greatest happily ever after or the most exquisite tragedy. There's nothing much to say on the synopsis, I don't think. It doesn't really tell a whole lot, which, you know, sometimes I kind of like going into stories like that. But this story ends with our main character attempting to find the door to the Prince of Hearts. It has moved or disappeared. It was a little confusing. Not sure how it happens, but she does end up locating it. And she is in love with this boy who suddenly became engaged to be married to a friend or family member. That one I don't actually remember. So she is seeking out the Prince of Hearts to fix her dilemma. So this first chapter ends with her meeting the Prince of Hearts. And I'm going to say that I'm honestly not holding much hope of wanting to read this. But upon meeting the Prince of Hearts, I'm enticed. He sounds very dangerous and mysterious. The writing style of this one is very much like a fairy tale. So this would be like, to me, it gives off very cozy vibes. For now, this is another one that's going to be returning to my shelf and going on my TBR. Alright, the last book that I wanted to try here was also another one that I probably will not part because it is just so dang beautiful. And that one is The Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. So, I mean, the cover is stunning. But you guys, look at these sprayed edges. I mean, have you ever seen anything so detailed? I mean, it's just like absolutely stunning. But this is pitched as a mid-autumn retelling. I know nothing about it. Never heard of it, no knowledge. Let me read the synopsis. There are many legends about my mother. Raised on the moon, Zayin. Oh, I'm so horrible at names. I'll put it up on the screen. She was unaware she was being hidden from the celestial emperor who exiled her mother for stealing the elixir of immortality. When her magic flares and her existence is discovered, she is forced to flee her home, leaving her mother behind. Alone, powerless, and afraid, she makes her way to the Celestial Kingdom, a land of wonder and secrets. In disguise, she trains along the Emperor's son, mastering archery and magic despite the passion which flames between them. To rescue her mother, she embarks on a quest confronting legendary creatures and vicious enemies. But when forbidden magic threatens the kingdom, she must challenge the ruthless emperor, leaving her torn between losing all she loves or plunging the realm into chaos. This reminds me of Star Daughter by Chakra. Oh, I'll put it up here on the screen because I'm having a mental brain fart. I attempted to read that last year and I did not enjoy it. I did finish it, but it was a struggle. One thing I have learned about myself is that celestial tales really are something that I enjoy. So in picking this up, I'm worried that this isn't going to be something that I'm going to enjoy, but who knows. This is going to be a hard pass. There was a description of her in this book that maybe I'm just not vibing with the writing, but it talked about her face being shaped like a melon seed. What? How is that pretty? It doesn't sound pretty to me. When describing beauty that is supposed to be all-encompassing, comparison to a melon seed just ruins the image, at least for me. But that's my opinion. By no means should you take my opinion and shape it as your own. If this is one you've been wanting to pick up, by all means do so. There have been plenty of reviews and people gushing over this story on social media, on Goodreads, but for me, the writing style is just a tad bit too flowery for me. And again, I was reminded of Star Daughter, as the concept is similar in my opinion. This is one I will not be reading. So for now, it is going to serve as decor on my shelf because I just don't know that I will be able to get rid of this edition. It's just so beautiful and I just love the stenciled edges on this one. So alrighty, you guys, that is the 6 books that I am going to talk about today. Fortunately, I think we have decided to get rid of 0, although I can pull at least 1 off of my TBR because it's not one that I really think I'm going to be picking up anytime soon, and that was the one we just spoke about, again, The Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I hope you found this informative and interesting. Maybe these are books that you have been looking at and again, not sure whether you wanted to read them or not, but I highly recommend the first chapter reading. A lot of times it will give you a good vibe for if nothing else, the writing style. And for me, that can be a make or break thing when I'm reading, so therefore that works for me. So that's it for today's video, guys. If you haven't already, please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you have a great day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.